I have to tell you, this is the Bible passage that we use most on Iona. This is the one that I quoted the most in my life serving in the Abbey on Iona. It's from the Acts of the Apostles. Now the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. With great power, the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. As I said, this was the reading that we shared the most on Iona. When I was leading retreats and part of the Iona community, we used to say that people would come to Iona seeking peace, but they would leave seeking justice and peace. George MacLeod, who founded the Iona community and rebuilt the ruined abbey starting in the 1930s, he would always ask people, what are we going to do about the atomic bomb or the environment or poverty? What are we going to do? The words that were central to his vision were we and do. Now, I think there needs to be an additional piece, which is about seeing, perceiving how everything works, how everything is held together, the whole-ism, that we are part of the whole. You've heard me say this before. Leonardo da Vinci said, learn how to see and realize that everything connects to everything else. So in a moment, we're going to really focus on Ubuntu, which is a Zulu word, and we're going to hear 5 South African voices talking about Ubuntu. But before they do, I want to give you the concise summary of today's sermon, right? So that you can see that in the videos and the things that I'm about to share. Here's the key teaching. Your soul belongs to the cosmos and not the other way around. Your soul belongs to the cosmos. The cosmos does not belong to you. Our life belongs to the collective life form and not just us. Right down to the tiniest detail, like our next breath actually belongs to God and is given to us, but it's really kind of on loan. And if we understand ourselves as separate to the whole, then our actions become centered around ourselves. And Christianity was never in the beginning anthropocentric, about individual soul redemption. No, this is a misunderstanding of Jesus' teachings, and it's too small. Father Richard Rohr says, your God has to be at least as big as the universe. I love that. Your God has to be at least as big as the cosmos. And then he goes on to say that modern astrology suggests that there's 6 galaxies for every single human being. That is enormous. I love that challenge to let our God be that enormous. So let's start in how we orientate in the world and our perception, and start to begin to overcome this myth of individualism that Western society is really plays too much airplay to, because it is not assumed. It is not. It's not the way that everybody sees the world. Here's this combo of videos. If you would like to see them in their entirety, I will post a link in the chat later. But here's my combo of Ubuntu videos with featuring African voices.
Ubuntu, in very broad terms, is an ethic of interdependence. It's an ethic that recognizes that everything that I do has an effect on you and your well-being, and everything that you do has an effect on me and my well-being. That we, although we are different people, we are essentially interconnected. And that is a truth that is not limited to Africa or South Africa. It's a truth that is universal. The ethic of Ubuntu says, when a child is kidnapped, my heart hurts like the heart of the mother whose child has been stolen.
There is a phrase in the Zulu language that says, Umuntu ngubutu ngabantu. I am because we are. Think about it. I'm not defined without you.
Because in our culture, there is no such thing as a solitary individual. We say a person is a person through other persons, that we belong in the bundle of life. And I want you to be all you can be, because that's the only way I can be all I can be. I need you. I need you to be you, so that I can be me. And that's why, you see, when you dehumanize another, whether you like it or not, inexorably you are yourself dehumanized.
And Ubuntu means to feel your shadow and not to throw your shadow onto other people. So to feel your shadow means to feel your difficult emotions, feel your prejudice, feel your jealousy, feel your anger, feel your hatred, and become like the lotus flower and transform it through breathing in those shadow, muddy parts of yourself, transforming it into your heart and then blossoming like a flower. That's Ubuntu.
In a more collective society, we realize from the inside that our own well-being is deeply tied to the well-being of others. Danger is shared, pain is shared, joy is shared, achievement is shared, houses are shared, food is shared. Ubuntu asks us to open our hearts and to share, is animated, empathetic action in every moment. Now, though the root word is about people, I thought that maybe Ubuntu was only about people. And then I met this young lady. Her name was Elvis. In fact, Solly gave her the name Elvis because he said she walked like she was doing the Elvis the pelvis dance. She was born with very badly deformed back legs, and pelvis. She arrived at our reserve from a reserve east of us on her migratory route. When I first saw her, I thought she would be dead in a matter of days. And yet for the next 5 years, she returned in the winter months. And we would be so excited to be out in the bush and to come across this unusual track. It looked like an inverted bracket, and we would drop whatever we were doing and we would follow. And then we would come around the corner, and there she would be with her herd. And the outpouring of emotion from people on our safari trucks as they saw her, there was the sense of kinship. And it reminded me that even people who grow up in cities feel a natural connection with the natural world and with animals. And yet still I remained amazed that she was surviving. And then one day we came across them at this small waterhole. It was sort of a hollow in the ground. And I watched as the matriarch drank. And then she turned in that beautiful slow motion of elephants. It looks like the arm in motion. And she began to make her way up the steep bank. The rest of the herd turned and began to follow. And I watched young Elvis begin to psych herself up for the hill. She got visibly, her ears came forward. She had a full go at it, and halfway up, her legs gave way, and she fell backwards. She attempted it a second time, and again, halfway up, she fell backwards. And on the third attempt, an amazing thing happened. Halfway up the bank, a young teenage elephant came in behind her, and he propped his trunk underneath her, and he began to shovel her up the bank. And it occurred to me that the rest of the herd was in fact looking after this young elephant. The next day I watched again as the matriarch broke a branch, and she would put it in her mouth, and then she would break a second one and drop it on the ground. And a consensus developed between all of us who were guiding people in that area that that herd was in fact moving slower to accommodate that elephant. What Elvis and the herd taught me caused me to expand my definition of Ubuntu. And I believe that in the cathedral of the wild, we get to see the most beautiful parts of ourselves reflected back at us. And it is not only through other people that we get to experience our humanity, but through all the creatures that live on this planet. If Africa has a gift to share, it's a gift of a more collective society.
This week I've been pondering why English doesn't have the word or an equivalent of the word Ubuntu. Now, language always reflects the culture that it belongs to. And often when we don't have a word for something, it shows our blind spots. It shows for sure that the thing, whatever it is not coming up in conversation between people. I started thinking about what's the closest in English that I have to Ubuntu? Sacred hospitality? Social justice? No, but it's none of these things. It's a different way of seeing. And it's not about individualism. Now, the first speaker we heard was Mpo Tutu, Desmond Tutu's daughter. She's a Reverend Canon. Very interesting woman. She said that Ubuntu is an ethic. An ethic that understands that everything I do has an effect on you. We are essentially interconnected. It's a way of seeing. And then in the second video, we heard the voice say, I am not defined without you. Now, I believe this at the core of my being, that I am a product of decades and decades of love, compassion, and mirroring by a whole host of people, many of whom I love. Some of them were just people in passing. That I am not defined without others. I believe that we must overcome the idea that we are separate. Just like the 3-year-old needs to learn that when they do this, I can't see you, so you can't see me. They will be very unsuccessful at hide and seek if they continue to do that. Desmond Tutu said, "In my culture, there is no such thing as a solitary individual." I'm going to change gears slightly here. I saw a video that was a conversation between Caroline Myss and Robert Holden. They were talking about the Enneagram and sacred geography and original blessing, original sin. And I believe that the way that we can access the wisdom of Ubuntu is by changing our way of seeing. And perhaps it involves unlearning a little bit. And that story about Elvis, the young elephant, really struck me. That it is in the creature, we are creatures, it is in the creature that this instinctual way of belonging and caring for each other resides. One of the things that Caroline Myss talks about a lot is that we have to learn to walk past the homeless person in the street. We have to learn to turn a blind eye to the suffering of others. It doesn't come naturally to us. That love comes naturally to us. So here's this fresh off the press. This was released on YouTube on Thursday.
I always thought that that doctrine of original sin was just bogus nonsense, you know, but it had such authority in Catholicism, such authority, this idea that we're born with this imperfection, imprimatur on our soul, you know. And it bothered me all just constantly. That can't be true. That can't be true. And one day it occurred to me that actually it's not about original sin, it's about the origin of sin. That in fact, what the real interesting question is what is the origin of sin? And that came to me when I was now a medical intuitive. And it was at that point that I was beginning to appreciate that we were in fact wired for an awakening inner life, that we were wired for it, that our biology was a theology, that we were wired for organic divinity, wired for it, and that God was in our blood and bones, and that everything, our nature was organic divinity, that our instincts were a system of communication, and that the whole role of life is to become incredibly conscious of the creative force of every thought we have and every word we say, and that all of it is a living theology, is that life is this incredible experience of the breath of God in us and around us, and that God's not an off-planet man. So when I saw that, I realized that really what sin is the conscious choice to shatter your holism and someone else's.
Wow, yeah.
It is the conscious choice to use your power to do a negative thing, to tell a lie, to know that I'm going to use my life force in some way to harm another life, or to do harm to myself, or to in some way make a choice that I know other people are going to be held accountable for, or in some way destroy the tapestry of the whole, that as a result of my life, the whole will suffer.
Yeah.
That is called sin, when it's conscious.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the original blessing. It took a whole universe to create you. Not just you, but everybody else too. You are a product of the wholeness of the universe, and everything else is too. This is a quote from Plato. Plato said, "The ruler of the universe has ordered all things with a view to the preservation and perfection of the whole." He then went on to say that you are created for the sake of the whole and not the whole for the sake of you. Now, this is rather important to make sure we've got this the right way round. You are created for the sake of the whole and not the whole for the sake of you.
Let's think about that. Now, folks in the sanctuary singing under your masks, thank you for that choice to be caring for the collective. I know what it's like to sing under a mask. And you all at home, you lucked out. Sing out, sing out. There's nobody there. You are the heart, you are the hands, you are the voice of spirit on earth. And who you are, and all you do is a blessing to the world. And again, you are the heart, you are the hands, you are the voice of spirit on earth. And who you are, and all you do is a blessing to the world. We are the heart, we are the hands, we are the voice of spirit on earth. And who we are, and all we do is a blessing to the world. And again, we are the heart, we are the hands, we are the voice of spirit on earth. And who we are, and all we do is a blessing to the world. I am the heart, I am the hands, I am the voice of spirit on earth. And who I am, and all I do is a blessing to the world. I am the heart, I am the hands, I am the voice of spirit on earth. And who I am, and all I do is a blessing to this world. I am a blessing to this world. We just heard Robert saying, we are created for the sake of the whole and not the other way around. Earlier I expressed this as that your next breath doesn't actually belong to you. It belongs to God. It lives in you and is gifted to you. But many would say it doesn't actually belong to you. The breath of life in us is borrowed from God, and the whole, our soul, belongs to the cosmos. Now, there's a mystical insight that I hear the mystics teaching over and over again. They have an experience of merging into the oneness. I think most of us only get tiny little echoes of that. But even the most hearted of us have moments of meeting a nephew or a child for the first time, being on a deathbed, feeling the strength of a team. In all of us, we have little glimpses of this oneness. But when the mystics have it, it's profound. And then it seems to change the way that they see one another. Here's an example of that. It's the words of Thomas Merton. He was a a monk, a Catholic monk that lived not that long ago, about 50 years ago. And he wrote these words, and my friend Alana Lewandowski set them into song. At the corner of 4th and Walnut, I realized that I loved all the people, and none of them could ever be alien to me. As if waking from a dream of my separateness, of the special vocation to be different. Thank God, I am only another member of the human race, like all the rest of them. I'm still a member of the human race, and what more glorious destiny is there, since the Word was made flesh and became a member too. Thank God, I am only another member of the human race, like all the rest of them. Thank God, I am only another member of the human race, like all the rest of them. We have a place in the web of life around us. And underneath that, the mystic knows that everything is held together in love. Seeing this so deeply that responding to the welfare of another is of course what you would do. But it's not just the mystics that know this. Small children know this. All of us know this. It just gets covered up. I believe that we can tap into Ubuntu, this way of understanding, even if we're not African. I have not been to Africa. My parents lived there for a while. My sister is adopted and half African. So I'm very interested in African culture. And I think it has a lot to teach us. Now, I wove in the teachings about original blessing and original sin because I think it's one of the shifts that we need to make in Western culture to really see out with the eyes of interconnectedness and to share our lives in a much healthier and I would say happier way. Here's the problem that I think we have to oversee: this Calvinistic inspired redemptive work ethic of the self-made human needs to go. It seems clear to me that this mindset includes within it that I am not worthy and is a key component of our collective consumerism and hoarding of the harvest. This consumerism and hoarding is stealing life from our descendants and the creatures, or as Caroline said earlier in her video, destroying the tapestry of the whole. I once heard a Native American teacher saying that the white people had wanting sickness. Wanting sickness. Why do we have this? And what can we do about it? I think that myth of original sin really feeds into it. And also the concept of ourselves as self-made individuals. We're not. We're collective. Independence is an utter myth. You try making your computer, or even just the tofu that you're going to eat for supper, or milking your goats and making fancy cheese, while importing your coffee beans, driving them across the world and roasting them in your oven and making an oven. Dozens and dozens of people and a fair few creatures from all over the world sit down with you every time you eat a meal. Do you know the Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh? He has this beautiful spiritual practice for meals. As you serve the food, you say, in this food, I see clearly the presence of the entire universe supporting my existence. And as you look at the plate filled with food, he suggests that you contemplate all living beings are struggling for life. May they all have enough food to eat this day. And just before you place the food in your mouth, he suggests you say, this plate is filled with food. I am aware that each morsel is the fruit of much hard work by those who produce it. As you begin to eat, with the first taste, I promise to practice loving kindness. With the second, I promise to relieve the suffering of others. With the third, I promise to see others' joys as my own. And he goes on. And then as you finish the meal, the plate is empty, my hunger is satisfied. I vow to live for the benefit of all beings. What I find so profoundly beautiful about this meal spiritual practice is he believes it. This is his daily bread. And if he can see that level of interconnectedness every time he eats, I can tap into that. And what's also amazing is that what he is saying is literally true. We are a complex, interconnected human system of being. And we live in this time of the World Wide Web, which is so fascinating. It's amazing that we can be on Zoom, that you can have a pastor in Vermont while you're all there in the church building 6 feet apart, and that people from wherever can watch us on the Zoom or YouTube or Facebook. And if you like the sermon enough, you can go back and watch it again. How amazing is that? We can also do courses with our great theological teachers, like I was studying with Matthew Fox recently. And we can follow Mpo Tutu and the Dalai Lama on Facebook. The dissemination of spiritual thought is happening very fast. And I've been thinking about that passage from Matthew 18:20, for where 2 or 3 gather in my name, I am with them. Now I'm wandering slightly from Ubuntu, so I want to bring that back in. And before we close, I have to say that Mpo Tutu urges us to not see Ubuntu with rose-tinted glasses. She says it's a work in progress. She says, something that I have noticed, sorry, that was my own words, let me find it. She says, the most casual glance across the socio-political public squares in Africa shows all manners of greed and ego-driven behavior that places personal power and privilege first, and the well-being of the community, the society, and the country doesn't even get a look in. She talks about Ubuntu becoming an export commodity, like cash crops. So Ubuntu is not a given. Right? When we are looking at it, it's helpful for us to understand it as a way of seeing and a work in progress. Mpo says the Ubuntu questions are, what do you want? How can we help you? What do you most need? And she says that these questions are equally valid for monks and mentors, governments and developers, agencies, as well as for engineers and technological developers. When we fail to ask these questions, she says, we cannot succeed in creating good design, and we cannot ensure sustainability. I love the way that she's placing Ubuntu everywhere, but also reminding us that it's not a given, it's something that we aim towards. So to close, I'm going to go back to Desmond Tutu, Umpo's father, and his concise words about Ubuntu. He says, Ubuntu is the essence of a human being and of being human. It speaks of the fact that my humanity is caught up and inextricably bound to yours. I am human because I belong. Ubuntu speaks about wholeness. It speaks about compassion. A person with Ubuntu is welcoming, hospitable, warm and generous, willing to share. Such people are open and available to others. They are willing to be vulnerable. They are affirming of others. They do not feel threatened that others are able and good, for they have a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that they belong to the greater whole. This so reminds me of Corinthians 13, 2 Corinthians. Back to Desmond. They know that they are diminished when others are humiliated, diminished when others are oppressed, diminished when others are treated as if they are less than who they are. The quality of Ubuntu gives people resilience, enabling them to survive and emerge, still human, despite all the efforts to dehumanize them. Amen. Thank you, Desmond, and all the other African voices for teaching us here this day about Ubuntu. Amen.